My family took over my vacation home without asking, and now they're upset that I'm renting it out. I'll admit it. I've always been the responsible one in the family. Growing up, I was the kid who triple checked my homework, volunteered to help my mom in the kitchen, and saved every birthday dollar from grandma. My brother Ethan and sister Rachel teased me mercilessly, calling me a goody two shoes, but I didn't mind. That hard work paid off. By the time I turned 32, I had finally fulfilled a lifelong dream: purchasing a vacation home. The house wasn't huge or extravagant. It was a charming 3-bedroom cottage near Lake Willow, nestled in a peaceful community surrounded by towering pine trees. The view from the back porch of the lake was breathtaking, and the fresh, pine scented air and quiet surroundings were a welcome escape from the city. I imagined weekends filled with quiet mornings with coffee, afternoons kayaking on the water, and evenings spent reading by the fire. It was supposed to be my personal sanctuary away from life's chaos. Initially, my family was supportive. My mom, Cynthia, was overflowing with pride. My dad, Greg, who usually kept quiet, made an exception and remarked how impressed he was that I had managed to afford it on my own. Ethan joked about me hosting Mallory's lake getaway retreat for them every summer, and Rachel said she couldn't wait to come visit. It all felt harmless at the time, just innocent excitement. But that quickly changed. The first time Ethan used the house without asking, I didn't even know about it until afterward. I had planned a last-minute trip to the lake one weekend, ready for some much-needed relaxation. When I arrived Friday evening, I was surprised to find Ethan's car in the driveway, the lights on, and voices and music coming from inside. I knocked on the door, and Ethan answered, holding a beer and looking completely unbothered. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I asked, stunned. "What am I doing here? This is my house. What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "Mom said you wouldn't mind." I needed a break, so I figured I'd come up for the weekend. Rachel poked her head out of the kitchen, grinning. "Hi, Ma. This place is amazing. You've got great taste." I was too shocked to say much as they made themselves completely at home. There were bags of groceries on the counter, blankets strewn over the couch, and a pile of dirty dishes in the sink. It was as if they'd forgotten it wasn't their house. "Next time, let me know," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. I didn't want to damage my relationship with my siblings, but I felt a rising resentment. I had worked so hard for this place, and now they were treating it like their own personal vacation spot. Ethan waved me off. Of course, of course. Sorry about that. We'll be out by Sunday evening." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Over the next few months, my family started to develop a sense of entitlement toward the house. Rachel took her boyfriend there for a romantic getaway one weekend, leaving the place littered with empty wine bottles and dirty linens. Ethan hosted a 4th of July barbecue without telling me, and I only found out later from the neighbor, Travis, who kindly texted me about the wild party. My parents weren't much better. One afternoon, Cynthia casually mentioned that she and Greg were thinking about spending a week at the house to get some fresh air. "Mom, you need to ask me first," I said, trying to sound firm but respectful. "I've been planning to use it this weekend." "Oh, Mallory, don't be like that," she said sweetly but dismissively. "It's just for a few days, and you know how much your dad and I love that lake. We'll take good care of it." "It's not about that, Mom. It's my house," I replied. "Our family's house," she corrected, as if I'd forgotten who raised me. "We're family, Mallory. You're not going to say no to your parents, are you?" I hated the guilt trip. I had always been close to my mom, and the last thing I wanted to do was hurt her feelings. But this wasn't a shared family property. It was something I had worked hard for, and their behavior was making me feel like my efforts didn't matter. Despite my protests, they went to the house anyway. By the time I arrived the next weekend, the fridge was empty, the laundry was undone, and the trash bins were overflowing. When I mentioned it to my mom, she brushed it off. "We ran out of time to clean before we left. I thought you wouldn't mind." "I do mind," I said, frustrated. As the weeks passed, the pattern only got worse. Every time I tried to set boundaries, someone found a way to ignore or undermine them. I was torn between standing my ground and avoiding a full-on family feud. The house, which had once been my sanctuary, was now starting to feel more like a burden than a blessing. One day, as I sat at my kitchen table at home, I found myself staring at the stack of bills for the vacation house. The mortgage, utility bills, and maintenance costs were piling up. I had budgeted carefully when I bought the place, but the added expenses of cleaning up after my family were beginning to strain my finances. Something had to change. I decided it was time to draw a line. I wasn't sure how they'd react, but I couldn't keep letting them treat my house like a free vacation spot. Little did I know, things were about to get even messier. After months of my family trampling over my boundaries, I reached my breaking point. The vacation home was becoming less of a retreat and more of a magnet for drama and stress. No matter how many times I explained that this house was my property and not a shared family space, they always found a way to turn it into an argument about family values. The straw that broke the camel's back came during Labor Day weekend. I had planned to spend the long weekend at the lake, hoping to relax and recharge, but when I arrived, I found my parents, Ethan, Rachel, and three of Rachel's friends lounging on the back porch, sipping cocktails like they were at a resort. Seeing them all laughing and having a great time while I was paying for it felt like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just that they were there uninvited, it was their sheer audacity in acting like they owned the place. Mallory! Rachel called out, waving her drink. Surprise! We thought you'd like some company this weekend. I stared at her, dumbfounded. You've got to be kidding me. Ethan came over, grinning, completely oblivious to my frustration. Hey, relax, Mal. We'll clean up before we go. Don't stress. Don't stress, I said, my voice rising. You can't just show up whenever you want. I plan to use the house this weekend. Rachel rolled her eyes, sipping her drink. Oh, come on. It's not that big of a deal. We're family. What's yours is ours, right? No, that's not how this works, I snapped, my patience finally unraveling. I bought this house with my own money. I pay the mortgage. I pay for the utilities. I pay for the cleaning. And all of you treat it like it's some free vacation rental. My mom came out of the kitchen, frowning. Mallory, calm down. There's no need to make a scene. We were just trying to enjoy some time together as a family. You were trying to enjoy time together, I said, my voice shaking with anger. At my expense, my dad, Greg, tried to play peacemaker. Mal, we didn't think you'd mind. We thought you'd be happy we were using the place instead of letting it sit empty. I do mind, I said firmly. I've told all of you repeatedly that you need to ask me before coming here. This isn't a family home. It's my home. That's when Rachel dropped the bomb. Well, maybe you shouldn't have bought a house if you weren't going to share it. It's selfish, Mallory. You're acting like this house is more important than your family. The word stung for a moment, but I was too stunned to respond. Selfish? I said finally. I've worked tirelessly to save for this house. I'm not selfish. I'm just tired of being taken advantage of. You know what? I said, finally finding my voice. If you all think I'm so selfish, then you won't have to worry about using the house anymore. I'm renting it out. The silence that followed was deafening. Cynthia looked horrified. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, I replied. I'm done with this. If you won't respect my boundaries, then I'll make sure there are boundaries in place that you'll have to respect. Ethan laughed nervously, as if he thought I was joking. You're overreacting, Mal. Come on, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, I said firmly. I've already been looking into it. I'll find renters who can appreciate this place instead of taking it for granted. And the locks are getting changed too. Rachel scoffed. Oh, so you're going to rent it out to strangers? That's a great idea, Mallory. Maybe they'll trash the place, and you'll come crawling back to us. Strangers would treat this house better than you do, I shot back. Cynthia put her hand on my arm, pleading, Mallory, don't do this. We're your family. Don't let money come between us. It's not about money, I said, pulling away. It's about respect, and clearly none of you have any for me. I didn't stay to listen to their arguments. I turned on my heel, walked back to my car, and drove away, my chest tight with anger and hurt. By the time I got home, I was already making arrangements to list the house as a vacation rental. If my family wanted to treat me like a landlord, then fine, I'd be one. Over the next few weeks, I worked with a real estate agent named Claire to prepare the house for renters. She was efficient and straightforward, and I appreciated her no-nonsense approach. She gave me advice on pricing, took professional photos of the property, and helped me set up an online listing. The first renter, a woman named Jessica, booked the house for 2 weeks in October. It felt strange handing the keys over to a stranger, but it also felt like a relief. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about unexpected visits from my family. As expected, the backlash from my family was immediate. My mom called me at least 3 times a day, begging me to reconsider. Ethan sent me passive aggressive texts about how family should come first. Rachel posted a cryptic rant on social media about people who let money ruin relationships. I ignored all of it. I had spent too long letting their opinions control me. This time, I was standing my ground. Jessica moved in at the beginning of October, and for a while, things seemed to calm down. I was beginning to feel like I had made the right decision, but then one night, Jessica called me. Her voice was shaky. "Hi, Mallory," she said. "Sorry to bother you, but has anyone else been given a key to the house?" My stomach dropped. "No, why?" "I think someone's been in here while I was out." When Jessica told me she thought someone had been in the house, my heart stopped. My first thought was that she might be mistaken, that maybe a repair person had come by, or there had been some sort of mix-up. But her voice, tight with unease, made it clear this wasn't just a minor misunderstanding. "Someone's been in there," I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "There were things out of place," Jessica replied. I left my laptop on the dining table, and when I came back, it was on the couch. A couple of kitchen drawers were open too. I know I didn't leave them like that. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Did you notice anything missing?" I asked. "No, nothing's been taken," she said, "but it's still unsettling." I locked the doors before I left. I promised Jessica I would investigate immediately. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone, torn between disbelief and anger. No one should have had access to the house except me, Jessica, and the real estate agent. I couldn't help but suspect my family. But the thought sickened me. Could they really sink that low? The next morning, I drove to the lake house, determined to get to the bottom of it. I called Claire, my real estate agent, on the way, and she confirmed that no one else should have had a key. When I arrived, Jessica was visibly relieved to see me. She explained everything in more detail, pointing out the small disturbances that had unnerved her. Nothing major had been taken or damaged, but it was clear that someone had been there. "Do you have cameras set up?" Jessica asked. "Maybe you can check the footage." I felt a pang of embarrassment as I admitted that I didn't. When I rented out the house, I hadn't thought security cameras were necessary. It was a quiet neighborhood, and I trusted that my family wouldn't interfere. Now, I regretted that decision. "I'll get cameras installed right away," I promised. "I'll make sure this doesn't happen again. I'm so sorry for the trouble." Jessica nodded, though she still seemed uneasy. "Thank you. I hope it's not someone dangerous." Her words lingered in my mind as I left that night. I couldn't sleep, imagining all sorts of scenarios: an opportunistic burglar, a nosy neighbor, or worst of all, one of my family members crossing a line I never thought they would. The following day, I decided to take action. I called a locksmith to change the locks on the house and had a security system installed with cameras covering all the entrances and common areas. It was an expense I hadn't planned for, but it felt necessary now. Not long after, I got my answer about who had been entering the house. The security footage didn't lie. It was Rachel. I stared at the footage in disbelief as Rachel casually walked through the front door of the house while Jessica was away, acting as if she owned the place. She rummaged through the kitchen drawers, checked the refrigerator, and even sprawled on the couch for a while before leaving. She hadn't taken anything, but that didn't make it any less invasive. Furious, I called her immediately. She answered on the second ring, her tone cheerful, as though she had no idea what she had done. "Mallory, what's up?" she asked. "What's up?" I snapped. "How about the fact that I caught you on camera breaking into my house?" There was a long pause. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I changed the locks, installed cameras, and I have footage of you letting yourself in while the renter wasn't there." "How did you even get in? Did you make a copy of the old key?" Rachel scoffed. "Oh my God, Mallory. You're acting like I robbed a bank or something. I had a spare key from when you first got the house. I didn't think it was a big deal." You didn't think it was a big deal to enter a house you don't own without permission while someone else was renting it? Do you have any idea how serious this is? Jessica could have called the cops on you. Rachel's tone turned defensive. Okay, chill out. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just wanted to grab some of my stuff from the last time I stayed there. Your stuff? I repeated, incredulous. This isn't your storage unit, Rachel. It's my property, and you have no right to be there. You're being so dramatic, she muttered. It's not like I trashed the place. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sheer entitlement was mind-boggling. You don't get it, do you? I said. This isn't about you leaving a mess. It's about respect. You've crossed every line imaginable, and now you're acting like you're the victim. Rachel huffed. Fine, whatever. I won't go back. Happy now? No, I'm not happy, I said coldly, because this isn't just about you. It's about all of you. Mom, Dad, Ethan. None of you have respected my boundaries since I bought this house. Well, that stops now. If any of you set foot in that house again without my permission, I will call the police. The threat hung in the air, heavy with finality. Rachel started to protest, but I hung up before she could finish. I was done arguing. Over the next few days, I braced myself for the fallout. Rachel, predictably, ran straight to my parents, who called me in a fury. Mallory, my mom said, her voice sharp with disapproval. What's this about you threatening to call the police on your sister? Did Rachel tell you why I said that? I asked. Because she broke into the house while someone else was renting it. That's trespassing, Mom. She didn't break in, my mom said, as if that somehow made it okay. She just used the key she already had. That's still trespassing, I said firmly, and it's completely unacceptable. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said. Rachel didn't mean any harm. She's your sister. That doesn't give her a free pass to do whatever she wants, I said. I don't care if it was Rachel, Ethan, or you. If anyone does this again, I'll treat it like I would with any stranger, family, or not. My mom fell silent, clearly stunned. I could tell she wanted to argue, but I wasn't backing down. I hung up, feeling exhausted but resolute. This was my house, and I was done letting my family walk all over me. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. For a while, things were quiet, too quiet. After my confrontation with Rachel and my stern warning to the rest of my family, I thought they had finally gotten the message. I hadn't heard much from them since that heated phone call with my mom, and I was relieved to have some peace. Jessica finished her stay at the house without further issues, and my next few renters came and went without complaints. For the first time in months, I felt like I was regaining control of my life and my property. But then, Travis, my next-door neighbor at the lake house, called me. Hey, Mallory, he began, his voice hesitant. This might be nothing, but I thought you should know there's been some unusual activity at the house lately. I frowned. What kind of activity? Well, I've seen your brother there a couple of times over the past week, Travis said. He showed up late at night and left early in the morning. I didn't want to assume anything, but I thought you had renters there right now? My stomach twisted into a knot. I did have renters, a family of 4 who had booked the house for the week. There was no reason for Ethan to be anywhere near the property. Are you sure it was him? I asked, my voice tight. Positive, Travis said. I know Ethan pretty well, and it was definitely him. I even saw him taking something out to his car one night, but I didn't want to pry. I thanked Travis for letting me know and hung up, my mind racing. Why was Ethan going to the house? And what was he doing there while renters were staying in it? The thought made my skin crawl. I decided to check the security footage. As I pulled up the recordings, my hands were shaking. Sure enough, there was Ethan, casually strolling into the house at 11 p.m. On a Tuesday night, just as Travis had described, Ethan showed up at the house again. He stayed for almost 2 hours before slipping back out, carrying a small duffel bag. 2 nights later, he did the same thing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. After everything I'd said, after the locks, the cameras, the confrontation, he was still crossing the line. It wasn't just infuriating, it was heartbreaking. I called Ethan immediately, and he answered with a cheerful, "Hey, Mallory, what's up?" "Don't what's up me," I snapped. "What were you doing at my house last week?" The pause on the other end confirmed it all. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice rising. "I have you on camera going into the house twice, while renters were staying there. Explain yourself. Ethan sighed, his tone shifting to defensive. Oh, come on, Mallory. It's not a big deal. I just needed to grab a few things I left behind. You what? I said, incredulous. That's the same excuse Rachel gave me, and it wasn't valid then either. You're trespassing, Ethan. Do you understand how serious this is? Relax, he said dismissively. It's not like I was bothering the renters. I was in and out. They didn't even know I was there. That's not the point, I yelled. You had no right to be there. You violated their privacy and mine. Do you have any idea what kind of legal trouble I could be in if they found out? You're lucky they didn't call the cops. Fine, I won't do it again, he muttered. Is that what you want to hear? It's not about what I want to hear, I said through gritted teeth. It's about respect, Ethan. And clearly you don't have any. I hung up furious. But as I reflected more on it, an uneasy feeling settled in. Why did Ethan need to sneak into the house at night to grab a few things? The duffel bag he carried out on the footage was nagging me. What was he taking? The next day, I drove up to the lake house to investigate. The renters had already checked out, so I had the place to myself. I scoured every inch of the house, looking for anything unusual. At first, everything seemed normal, but when I opened the closet in the guest bedroom, I froze. Inside was a box with Ethan's handwriting on it. It was filled with what looked like old tools, a stack of paperwork, and a lockbox. My heart raced as I opened the lockbox, half expecting to find something sinister. Instead, I found rolls of cash and a small bag of what looked like pills. I stared at the contents, my mind spinning. What the hell was Ethan doing? Why was he storing cash and drugs in my house? And why here of all places? I quickly packed everything into my car and drove straight to Travis's house. He greeted me with a concerned look. Mallory, everything okay? Not really, I admitted. I found something in the house and I need your opinion. I showed him the box and its contents and his expression darkened. This doesn't look good, he said. If I had to guess, I'd say Ethan's been using your house as some kind of stash spot. You need to be careful, Mallory. This could get messy. Messy didn't even begin to cover it. I felt sick as I realized the implications. If someone else had found this box, one of the renters, the police, it would have been me in trouble, not Ethan. My name was on the deed, my name was on the rental agreement, and yet here I was, cleaning up his mess. That night, I confronted Ethan again, this time in person. I showed him the box and demanded an explanation. At first, he denied everything, but when I refused to back down, he finally cracked. Fine, he said, throwing his hands up in defeat. I've been in a tight spot, okay? I owed some people money, and I needed a safe place to keep my stuff. I didn't think it was a big deal. Not a big deal? I repeated, my voice trembling with rage. You used my house to stash cash and drugs, Ethan. Do you have any idea what kind of risk you put me in? What if the renters had found this? What if the police had shown up? Did you even think about that? I didn't think it would be a problem, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. That's the problem, Ethan, I shouted. You never think about anyone but yourself, and now I'm left cleaning up your mess. Ethan tried to apologize, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I made it clear that he was never to set foot in the house again, not for any reason. I meant it. As I drove home, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the deep cracks in my family dynamic, entitlement, a lack of accountability, and the way they'd taken me for granted for years. Something had to change, and if they weren't willing to change, then I'd have to protect myself, no matter how much it hurt. After confronting Ethan, I realized that the problems with my family went deeper than I'd ever admitted to myself. It wasn't just about the house, it was about a pattern of entitlement and boundary crossing that had been going on for years. The house was just the latest battleground, and I was determined to win this time. The day after our confrontation, I met with Claire, my real estate agent, to discuss the situation. I explained everything: Ethan's trespassing, the stash I'd found, and my growing concerns about my family's behavior. Claire listened carefully, her brow furrowed. You've got to protect yourself, Mallory, she said firmly. If they've crossed this many lines already, there's nothing stopping them from doing it again. Have you thought about involving a lawyer? The idea made my stomach churn, but I knew she was right. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore, it was a legal and financial risk. If my family continued to interfere with the house or the renters, I could face serious consequences. I needed to make sure I was covered. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer named Eric, who specialized in property disputes. He was professional, straightforward, and didn't sugarcoat the situation. Mallory, you're in a tricky spot, Eric said during our first meeting. Your family feels entitled to the house. They're not going to respect your boundaries unless you make it clear there are legal consequences for crossing them. We worked together to draft a formal letter to my family outlining the rules and boundaries for the house. It stated that the property was solely mine, that any unauthorized entry would be considered trespassing, and that I would take legal action if necessary. It wasn't an easy letter to write, but it was necessary. I sent the letter to my parents, Ethan and Rachel, and the reaction was immediate. My mom called me in tears, accusing me of turning my back on the family. Ethan texted me a string of angry messages, calling me dramatic and selfish. Rachel posted another vague rant on social media about people who think money is more important than family. It hurt, but I stood firm. I'd spent too long letting their guilt trips control me, and I wasn't going to let it happen anymore. Meanwhile, I took additional steps to secure the house. I installed more security cameras, added a reinforced door lock, and even put up a sign warning that the property was under surveillance. I wanted to make it crystal clear that the house was off limits. One unexpected bright spot during this time was Jessica, the renter who'd first alerted me to the break-ins. She reached out to check in and offered to leave a glowing review of the property online. I know it's been a tough situation, she said, but you've handled it so well. I'm sure future renters will feel safe knowing you're on top of things. Her kindness reminded me that not everyone was like my family. There were people out there who respected boundaries and appreciated my efforts. It was a small comfort, but it meant a lot. Then came the final showdown. About a month after I sent the formal letter, I got an alert from the security system. Someone had triggered the motion sensor at the back door of the house. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and saw my mom and dad standing there, trying to unlock the door with what looked like an old key. I was livid. After everything I'd said, after all the warnings, they were still pushing the limits. I called my mom immediately, watching them fumble with the lock as the phone rang. She answered on the second ring. Mom, what are you doing at the house? I asked, my voice icy. We just wanted to check on things, she said defensively. We thought you wouldn't mind. I do mind, I snapped. I've told you over and over that you're not allowed to be there without my permission. Did you even read the letter I sent you? Mallory, we're your parents, she said, as if that excused everything. We're not strangers. We have every right to be here. No, you don't, I said firmly. This isn't a family property. It's my property. And if you don't leave right now, I'll have no choice but to call the police. That got her attention. You wouldn't, she said, her voice shaking. Try me, I said. There was a long silence, and then I saw my dad put his arm on her shoulder and gently guide her away from the door. They left without another word, and I sat there shaking with a mix of anger and sadness. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it was also necessary. They needed to understand that I was serious. After that incident, things finally began to settle down. My family stopped calling and texting as much, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I continued renting out the house, and the reviews from renters were overwhelmingly positive. The extra income was a huge help, and I finally started to enjoy the freedom and stability I'd worked so hard to achieve. One day, I got a letter in the mail from my mom. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement of sorts. She wrote that she understood why I'd been so upset and that she hoped we could rebuild our relationship in time. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As for Ethan and Rachel, I kept my distance. I still love them. They were my siblings after all. But I knew I couldn't let them back into my life until they showed they could respect my boundaries. Whether that would ever happen, I wasn't sure. Looking back, the whole experience was a painful but necessary lesson. I'd always been the responsible one in my family, the one who kept everything running smoothly and put everyone else's needs ahead of my own. But owning the house and standing up for it taught me the importance of putting myself first sometimes. The lake house wasn't just a place to escape anymore. It was a symbol of my hard work, my independence, and my ability to stand up for what mattered to me. And no one, not even my family, could take that away from me.